Ms. Jessica Tan asked about MTI's strategies to grow the economy amidst global uncertainties and our domestic constraints. Given the weak external environment and the tighter labor situation domestically, we expect a modest 1 to 3% growth for Singapore in 2013 and a 3 to 4% average growth for the rest of this decade. For a country that has enjoyed twice that rate of growth since 2003, this slowdown will be a significant change. The slowdown will be most acutely felt in our workforce as our population ages and our citizen workforce shrinks over time. Foreign manpower as a complement to our Singaporean core must be managed judiciously. To deal with this slowdown, our companies must restructure and aim for higher productivity. Restructuring is painful, but it is unavoidable. Both Ms. Jessica Tan and Ms. Fumiha asked whether we can stay globally competitive amidst our restructuring and whether Singapore can retain its high value-added activities. The outcome of our efforts will in fact have a major impact on our future, what the economy will look like and what kinds of jobs Singaporeans will have. We are therefore restructuring to stay more competitive, not less. But to do so successfully, we must carefully pace and calibrate the changes. While we accept a slower growth trajectory, we aim to create quality growth and to create higher value jobs for Singaporeans. MTI strategies for achieving quality growth are therefore twofold. First, to stay open and flexible to tap global and regional opportunities. And second, to restructure the economy so that our companies and workers can achieve higher productivity and sustainability. Let me first turn to the strategy of staying open. Ms. Jessica Tan asked about our Global Asia Hub strategy, and in particular, specific high-growth sectors that Singapore companies could focus on here in Singapore as well as when internationalizing. The good news is that the Asia growth story is largely intact, and our Global Asia Hub strategy continues to resonate with global and regional investors. We also see opportunities for Singapore companies seeking to tap Asia's growth and the continuing economic integration of our region. Let me highlight 4 sectors as examples. First, the high-value pharmaceutical sector offers high wages and employs more than 5,700 people, where 80% perform skilled jobs. In 2012, the pharmaceutical value added grew by 14% to 13 billion Singapore dollars. Biologics is one niche area within the industry that has been gaining momentum. The first biologics facility was set up in 2007. We now have 8, including 2 first-in-Asia biologics manufacturing investments from Novartis and Amgen. Over the next 3 to 5 years, the biologics sector will create at least 500 jobs, highly skilled jobs for chemists, for microbiologists, biotechnologists, engineers, and technicians. The second sector is baby nutrition and baby care. This is another growing segment fueled mainly by the population boom in Asia and the rising middle class. Singapore has become an established hub for commercial and innovative activities in baby nutrition and baby care. The world's top infant nutrition players like Nestle Nutrition, Danone, Mead Johnson Abbott Nutrition, and Friesland Campina have all located themselves here, and more recently, Procter & Gamble relocated its global HQ for baby care, including its Pampers brand, to Singapore. At the other end of the spectrum from infant nutrition is the silver industry. This is a growth segment highlighted by Mr. Chen Xiaomao. We agree with him that Singapore can serve as a platform for us to test out products and then to replicate this wider afield in Asia. As we all know, Asia is also growing, and there's a growing demand for aged products. Singapore is therefore well placed to tap into this market. In fact, we have local entrepreneurs who are seeking to tap this growing market. Soft Shell, for example, is a local spin-off from the Institute of Materials Research and Engineering. It has pioneered a responsive soft shell armor that hardens upon sudden impact and dissipate the force. So Soft Shell has obtained grant funding from A-Star and Spring to develop prototypes for elderly hip protectors. So when you fall, the armor will become hardened, and that will protect the elderly from hip injury. And Soft Shell is also working with IE Singapore to establish its manufacturing supply chain as well as its overseas distribution channels. Global companies too are using Singapore to innovate products and services for the silver industry. We have Siemens Medical Instruments manufacturing and R&D facility here, where it developed and launched its ACE hearing aid. This is the most discrete product in its hearing aid range. And Procter & Gamble and the University of Cincinnati have also partnered Singapore Polytechnic to set up the Live Well Collaborative Singapore project. This non-profit and independent innovation research center uses consumer insights to co-create products and services with the industry players. And the fourth area that I'd like to highlight is high-end logistics services to illustrate the big data that Ms. Tan Su Shan talked about. High-end logistics services now extend beyond the physical flow of goods. It uses data analytics capabilities to add value to logistics services. So such services rely on strategic planning as well as solutions development to better manage the supply chain in the whole of Asia. The rise in demand for services in Asia has led top global third-party logistics players, or 3PLs, such as DHL, UPS, and Nippon Express, to establish their regional or global functions in Singapore. In particular, the world's #1 air express and 3PL company, DHL, has established its Global Services Logistics Center of Excellence here to develop innovative and specialized logistics solutions for its clients worldwide. Our Singapore logistics companies are also growing. Pacific Integrated Logistics, PIL Private Limited, started out as a traditional freight forwarder and is now a fully integrated logistics solutions provider. PIL first established its international presence in Shanghai and Suzhou. With IE Singapore's help, PIL ventured into Chengdu, where rapid infrastructure investments have created a strong demand for logistics services. PIL is also well connected to the Southeast Asian market and uses Singapore as its headquarters to serve their customers in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam. And by the second half of this year, PIL will also be in Myanmar. Singapore will strengthen our value proposition as an open and connected economy so that we can continue to attract companies like PIL to cite their high value-added functions here and expand regionally. Ms. Jessica Tan asked about the types of assistance available to help our companies to internationalize. The government offers a wide suite of initiatives to holistically support companies in this area. SMS Lee Shen will elaborate in greater detail, but let me touch on financing, something that Ms. Jessica Tan raised. Last year, IE Singapore launched the Political Risk Insurance Scheme, or PIRS, to help Singapore-based companies protect their projects and investments from political risks when they internationalize. Political risk insurance is a useful risk mitigation tool, and this scheme will help cover up to 2 billion Singapore dollars in overseas investments over the next 3 years. This year, we will work with the Asian Development Bank, or the ADB, and private insurers to expand the ADB's trade finance program to enhance trade flows for Singapore-based companies. Many companies already benefit from this program, which currently supports over $1 billion of trade capacity. Given that our companies are exporting to Asia's emerging markets, demand for such trade financing programs will continue to be high. IE Singapore will release more details of this scheme later. Mr. Vikram Nair asked about our effectiveness and our use of our FTAs. As you know, over the years, we have developed growing trade linkages with a successful network of free trade agreements. We have free trade agreements with all our major trading partners, and these FTAs improve market access for our companies, particularly our SMEs, as they expand overseas. In 2012, more than 1,700 companies benefited from our FTAs, and we expect this number to increase as we expand our FTA networks and make them more user-friendly. Our companies, including our SMEs, also benefit by having tariff savings from our FTA. And in answer to Mr. Vikram Nair's query, we have a system by which IE Singapore tracks companies who can benefit from the FTA and make sure they have outreach programs to reach out to these companies as a cluster as well as individually. We recently concluded the FTA with EU, our second largest trading partner and largest foreign investor. Once the EU-Singapore FTA enters into force, the EU will eliminate its tariffs for imports originating from Singapore over a period of 5 years. Therefore, exporters of electronics, machinery, or chemicals, including our SMEs, will enjoy improved market access into the EU. As the EU has relatively high tariff rates for processed foods, the elimination of tariffs under the EU-Singapore FTA will benefit our food manufacturing companies, many of whom are SMEs. Let me now turn to our second strategic thrust, and that is to restructure for productivity and for quality growth. We recognize that there are certain downside risks to this strategy, and we must be aware of this. For example, in a tight labor market with limited resources, there will, of course, be some opportunities that we may have to forego. The second downside risk is the risk of rising structural inflation and rising business costs given the very tight labor market. We are very mindful of all these risks, especially not to allow runaway inflation or wage price spiral to gain traction. Therefore, the wage credit scheme, which was announced during the budget statement, will help the companies defray some of these wage increases, and which will then prevent them from being entirely passed on to the consumer. In addition, we expect the subdued state of the global economy to weigh on overall demand, and this may help contain inflation in the near term. But over the long term, productivity improvements arising from our current restructuring should help to prevent higher costs from fueling strong price increases. The government has therefore adopted a multi-pronged approach to manage inflation and will continue to watch the developments very closely. But the key to managing the whole process is to make sure that we continue to pace and calibrate the changes carefully as we restructure. I acknowledge several members' observations that productivity changes needs time, and this is precisely how we have structured our strategy. Our restructuring strategies are also structured for each sector so that we know that we cannot have one size fits all, and therefore we have taken a sectoral approach in developing plans together with the private sector. Over the last 3 years, in fact, the National Productivity and Continuing Education Council, NPCC, has worked and endorsed productivity roadmaps for 12 sectors, including the retail, the food manufacturing, electronics and precision engineering sectors. And roadmaps for the remaining 4 priority sectors will be endorsed soon. And for each sector, we engage the industry closely to study their productivity challenges before recommending specific initiatives and targets. And even with the roadmaps, we continue to maintain this under regular reviews and continue to engage with the industry players to make sure that the roadmaps continue to remain relevant. Let me give you an example for illustration so you can understand the comprehensive way in which we go about developing this strategy. This is the marine and offshore sector. As you all know, Singapore is a global leader in the marine and offshore sector. Our shipyards command 70% of global market share in offshore drilling rigs and conversion of tankers to production vessels. However, we believe that there's still room to improve, particularly in the land and labor productivity, as well as move the sector up the value chain. And therefore, transforming this sector will take place in several ways. First, we will improve land and labor productivity through automation and enhancing process workflows. An example is Sembcorp Marine's integrated new yard, which will be ready by the second half of this year. And with the improved logistics, the redesigned workflows, and process automation, manpower requirements will be reduced in the long term for this new yard. Second, we have worked with the shipyards to strengthen their supplier base. ST Marine, for example, is one of the largest local shipyards involved in shipbuilding and ship repair. And it procures ship repair services from many of its subcontractors. With spring support, ST Marine partnered 2 of its subcontractors, Glen Marine Services and Comilla Marine Services, to adopt a new method of using wet abrasives to remove paint or rust from a ship's surface. This increased efficiency has resulted in time savings of between 5 to 10%. Third, companies are also encouraged to enhance their design and engineering capabilities, which will allow them to differentiate themselves from their global competitors in the long term. Keppel Offshore and Marine Technology Center presently has a team of 86 researchers who do upstream R&D on new product designs to augment Keppel's design and engineering capabilities. And finally, we are also tightening the dependency ratio ceiling, but will phase these changes over 5 years. This is to ensure the companies have time to adjust, and we will also allow the shipyards to ride the current upturn in the offshore sector and undertake the necessary changes to maintain their leadership position in the long run. Collectively, we believe these restructuring efforts will result in a 4 to 6% compounded annual growth rate in value added per worker between 2011 to 2020. But we will continue to monitor the sector's progress because we believe that the marine and offshore sector can continue to play a key role in Singapore's economy. So what we have done in the marine and offshore sector, we have also systematically do so for the other sectors, particularly in the more challenging sectors such as retail and the F&B sectors. And beyond each sector, we also find cross-cutting methods to strengthen the linkages between our various sectors. Members have also raised concerns about how our SMEs and our micro-enterprises could cope with the restructuring. As you all will have heard from DPM Taman, we pay particular attention to our SMEs because they are an important part of our economy. They provide good jobs for some 1.3 million Singaporeans. The government continues to be committed to help our SMEs to go through this difficult transition period, And many of the assistance measures introduced this year, in fact, have been weighted to benefit the SMEs more. This was done consciously and deliberately because we want to help our SMEs. Minister of State Teo Ser Luck will elaborate on these measures later on when he talks about the measures to help our SMEs. Let me now address Mr. Teo Siong Seng's point about industrial properties. As I mentioned several times in this House, JTC remains committed to provide industrial land competitively compared to our benchmark range of competing locations. We will continue to do so. On PEP, I think this is a useful suggestion. I think the PEP has been very effective in the past. We will continue to reactivate it to provide leadership within government agencies and ministries to cut red tape and to reduce compliance costs. Mr. Teo Siong Seng also asked us to adopt a more flexible approach in each sector. I hope I've illustrated that with the example of the marine and offshore sector, and in fact we do so for the other sectors too. Let me just elaborate on our measures to help the SMEs. In fact, we embarked on this in a deliberate attempt last year. In last April, MOS Teo Ser Luck led a committee of representatives from MTI, Spring, IE Singapore, as well as key industry partners to comprehensively review our schemes in helping the SMEs. And arising from this review, we will be implementing 8 strategies to help the SMEs. MOS Teo Ser Luck will elaborate on them later on. Let me just highlight one of these schemes. And this is the Sme Talent Program, which was earlier announced at budget. The aim of this program is to create a pipeline of local talent for SMEs. And under this program, Spring will match over 3,000 promising polytechnic and ITE students with SMEs over the next 5 years. Upon graduation, these students will start their careers with the SMEs that can offer them good jobs and as well as training. And we will work through the trade associations and chambers for this program, since they know the industry best and will be able to identify progressive SMEs that can work and absorb these students. We hope that this will attract more local talent to join the SMEs and in fact encourage the entrepreneurial spirit in Singapore. The government will co-fund this program, which will amount to $70 million over 5 years. Madam Chairperson, let me summarize the key thrusts of our work ahead. First, we must stay open and flexible in order to tap global and regional opportunities that are still opening up around us. And second, we must persevere in our restructuring to achieve higher productivity and quality growth for all Singaporeans. We all know there are no quick fixes in addressing our challenges. The path of restructuring will not be easy, but the government is committed to help our companies face the challenges ahead. Thank you.